Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Celtic Down Under Tuesday Crew podcast. I'll be your host for tonight, Stephen, and I'm delighted to be joined by Steve and Willie. So, guys, it's been a bit of a tough week to be a Celtic fan this week, with Angie's first media appearance in Spurs colours after the shortest family holiday in history. And also the news reaching us now that we might as well not bother turning up next season as we've been soundly defeated in the closed season cup by Sefco for the umpteenth year in a row. So how are we all feeling about the week just gone? I'll go to you first, Steve.
Oh, look, I kind of stepped back from from last couple of pods, not that deliberately, but just through work and whatnot. So I've probably had more time to reflect on it than everyone else. Look, I mean, I worry about the board. You know, do I have confidence in the board finding another Ange? I'm not sure, but we'll get into that in a moment. But generally, yeah, I still think we're in such a good position. You know, we've got a good, healthy, valuable squad with lots of time on the contracts. You know, we've got automatic qualification in the Champions League, so we've got a longer summer break than, we normally have, etc. We're in a good position. We just don't need to fall over our own feet in true Celtic board style.
Yeah, and Willie, how did you feel seeing Ange with the Spurs colours in the background? I don't know how they got that set over to the Greek islands in time, but hey, they managed it.
They might have just gone to London for a city break on their way over to Greece, just be 48 hours there. But it's not of interest to me. I listen to it, it's just sound bites, it's just typical opening speech as you go sort of thing. But it's not my concern anymore, so I just sort of move on from that. And as for the closed door cap, I can't wait for the pre-season friendly results to start coming in when we lose a game here or there and they start cheering from the rafters that it's all falling apart, because we all know that we're not very good at pre-season friendlies and they don't really matter. So it's when the real deal sort of comes into play, that's when it all counts.
Yeah, before we get into the main business of the evening, we'll probably just touch on a couple of stories that have circulating this week. One is a bit of transfer speculation involving Rio Hatate and Kyogo moving down to Spurs to join Ange. I don't think there's anything much in it. Is there anything we need to read into that, Steve, or is that just the usual paper stuff?
I think it's usual paper, trying to fill column inches, which they have to do, and the clickbait nature of it and all the rest of it. But look, even if there is something to it, and we can talk about whether there should be something to it, whether maybe it would make sense to try and move one of them on at this point. But even if there is something to it, then they've got long contracts, and I think, we'd be well compensated for it. So, as long as we're not letting Brendan Rodgers and Lee Congleton loose with a checkbook, we should be fine. So, yeah.
Yeah, speaking of checkbooks, Willie, word coming through, this evening suggests that we've had a fee accepted for a player from Vålerenga in Norway, a guy called Odin Tiago Holm, a young 20-year-old. I think he's a midfielder. Who do we think's, first of all, do we reckon that's true? And secondly, who's making these sort of signings?
Seems to be a lot of sort of truth to it, but I dare say it'll be a sort of legacy issue that'll come into play. Ange might have scouted him, the coaches would have scouted him. 20-year-old, he might well go into the B team for the season, and then we'll see where it goes from there. Or he might just come in and go straight back out on loan again, back to Vålerenga for the season. It's not unheard of. We've seen it before with Rigidi and the other boy Shaw that came from Sheffield Wednesday. They both came in. I don't think Ange was too aware of them when they arrived. So they were just up and coming players that we thought would be good to make a move on. Perhaps it's something that they've just seen and thought this could be good business. Ange was really keen on him, so let's just go ahead and do it. It's 2.5 million. It's not. It's a reasonable outlay, but it's not a big big fee if he is gonna be as good as what we hope he's gonna be.
I actually see it as a little bit of a positive, to be honest, because we've spoken the past few weeks about how our biggest concern was Ange disappears and the whole structure of the club just collapses in his aftermath. But this seems to suggest there may be life there yet, and there might be still sort of working structure going on behind the scenes where that a new manager might fit into quite seamlessly. Do you think that's fair, Steve?
I'd like to think so, and we talked probably 2 or 3 weeks ago about the concept of director of football, and listening to some other folks over the last few weeks, it feels like we might actually kind of have almost a director of football in Mark Lowell. But the whole thought process behind that model is that you get continuity, and if you've got the strategy in place that says our style is this, then managers coming and going, yes, it's disruptive, but we can still carry on our business. We can still sign, we can still scout and develop players to suit that model. So the optimistic part of me says, okay, yeah, this is a sign that some of that infrastructure that I was moaning about a few weeks ago that we haven't built out, maybe it is there, because that's it's not an insignificant spend. For Celtic, let's be honest. I know we all want to be shopping in more expensive shops, over the summer, but it's still a reasonable spend. And my gut feel says it would need some form of approval, if you like, or some form of sign off that says, yeah, this is compatible with what we're trying to do. So yeah, maybe at risk of reading too much into it a bit, Steve, but it feels positive to my mind.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think at 2.5 million, it's probably, for me, it's a first team signing. So I guess we'll see, and it will be interesting to see what happens when the new manager comes in. So welcome to everyone joining us live on the YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. If you're listening to the audio, please like and subscribe whenever you get your podcasts. Please feel free to jump on the comments tonight and share your opinion with us. And if you want to join the conversation after the show, reach out to us on our social media channels. We're on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Handles at the top of the screen or in the episode notes. So we'll start off tonight with Celtic's search for a new manager, which is ongoing. Just a quick update on the current odds. We've got Brendan Rodgers as the outright favourite at the moment at 1-2. So he's odds on at the moment. If you can find a company that will give you a bet on Brendan Rodgers. You've got Enzo Maresca at 5-1. Daniel Farke, 14-1. You've got Knutson at 20-1. Farioli at 20-1. And Davy Moyes drifted out at 25-1. So for me, it tends to be coming down to 2 at this point in time, and that being Brendan Rodgers or Enzo Maresca. Enzo Maresca being the Man City assistant manager, fresh from a Champions League win, and then having to fish his dad out of a pub somewhere in Istanbul where he got lost on Saturday night. Well, what a great story that was. So it's fair to say the prospect of Rodgers returning has divided the support, mostly due to how he left the club, but also recruitment, player management, relations with the CEO, as well as concerns about the club maybe going back instead of looking forward. So in light of this, we thought it'd be a good idea to take a good look in detail at Brendan's first spell at the club and see if our opinions and fears are justified looking at that. So Brendan Rodgers, just a quick biography. He was born on the 26th of January 1973 in Carnlough, County Antrim in the north of Ireland. He did have a short playing career, playing for Ballymena United and Reading, but unfortunately a genetic knee condition forced him to retire at 20 years of age. He then played a bit of non-league football, but moved into youth coaching with Reading. Eventually worked his way up to Reading as academy director, and then he was invited by Jose Mourinho to come to Chelsea as the head of youth development in 2004, and 2 years later he became the reserve team manager. 2008 he moved to Championship team Watford, and in 2009 moved on to Reading, didn't have the happiest of times at Reading, and he left by mutual consent in December of the same year. Accepted the manager's job at Reading in 2010 and took them into the Premier League through the playoffs. Kept them in the league the following year, well above the relegation zone. And this earned him his move to Liverpool in 2012, where he spent 3 seasons there, missing out the Premier League title in 2012-13 by 2 points to Man City, due in no small thanks to a slip from Mr. Steven Gerrard. This was to be his highest finish, and he was sacked in October 2015 with Liverpool in 10th position in the EPL. He was then appointed Celtic manager on the 20th of May 2016, being unveiled at Celtic Park in front of 13,000 happy fans and Peter Lawwell. So just looking at his first season at Celtic, we'll do this on a season-by-season basis, see what we think. So the first season started badly, lost his first match to Lincoln Red Imps from Gibraltar in a Champions League qualifier. Fortunately won the return leg 3-0, and we went on to qualify for the UCL group stages. I beaten Hapoel Beersheva 5-4 in aggregate. So the UCL group stages, we finished bottom of the group, a group which included Barcelona, Man City and Borussia Mönchengladbach. Mixed results, including a 7-0 hammering by Barcelona in the Nou Camp and 2 draws home and away against Man City, which gained us a lot of credit. Won the League Cup in 2017, beating Aberdeen 3-0 in the final. Won the league at a canter with 106 points without losing a game, including 2 5-1 pumpings of the Huns, clinching the title at Tynecastle with 8 games to go. Scottish Cup followed with a dramatic injury time winner by Tom Rogic in a 2-1 win over Aberdeen to complete an invincible treble. So I'll just grab your thoughts of season 1. I'll go to you first, Willie.
Yeah, season 1, it was a great season. I mean, we started, the Lincoln Red Imps game wasn't a great start, but it got better and it got better and it got better, and by the end of the season we were absolutely flying. The only game I managed to get to that season was a pre-season friendly against Maribor in Maribor, which was a 0-0 draw, rather drab. Nadir Chiefchi playing up front, but the only time I ever seen him play, and the only time I ever want to see him play. He was absolutely pathetic. Some of that season, I think we beat Rangers 5-1 in September, but I think the most significant results of that season was April, the Scottish Cup semi-final, 4-0 win, and then we went off and pumped them 5-1 at Ibrox 2 weeks later. So it was a 9-1 aggregate in the space of 2 weeks over Rangers. I mean, it was a great time. We were just, I think, if I look at my notes, we were so far in front of them, it was unbelievable. They actually finished third, 9 points adrift of Aberdeen that season, and that was a season when they came back from the Championship and they were going to beat us. They had our number because they beat us in a penalty shootout in the semi-final the season before, and really did put them back in their place. So it was a great time. You know what I mean? It's not often you see a team go invincible in the league, but then to win the both cups as well, it was great.
Yeah, just before I go to you, Steve, as has been pointed out to me in the comments, it was Swansea that he took into the Premier League and not Reading, as I incorrectly said, and that's what you get for speed reading your notes too fast. So, yeah, Steve, thoughts on season 1 for Rodgers at Celtic?
Well, before we do that, what knowledgeable viewers we've got, picking up on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm glad someone's listening.
Yeah. The thing that stuck out to me from that season 1, I mean, obviously the headlines, Invincible treble, it's phenomenal, phenomenal achievement, and, was a sign of things to come, which we'll come on to in a moment. But it was the rebirth of some of the players, so he brought in some talent, and we'll look at his signing track record in a minute maybe, but if you look at what he did with Brown, Brown, it felt like he was tired. It felt like he was maybe even done. He might have been looking for, an exit, or, it didn't seem like he was playing with the same energy. And it felt like he really reinvigorated Brown. Sinclair he brought in, that was a breath of fresh air, right from the very first game, against Hearts, coming on as a sub and, getting the winner, which is always fun at Tynecastle. And obviously Dembele we'll talk about, and Brodge and Armstrong. You look at that team and there's an awful lot of talent around about that team. Some of it predated Rodgers, absolutely, but it did also feel like Rodgers got a lot out of those players as well. So it was a very talented bunch of players. That really drew results. Like actually got the results. The other observation I'd make is he saw off 3 managers in that season. So there was Mark Warburton. Do you remember him with all the bread wrappers on the head?
the bread man.
Yeah. Then talking about head, there was Graham Murphy who liked to stand on his head, and then there was Pedro Cagina who liked to stand in a hedge. So like Willie said, I think it was their first season back or up in the Premiership, depending on your point of view around Rangers versus the Rangers. And the usual thing, and we're seeing some of it now, where, they're very good when they're not on the park, and they can talk a good game, and, their poodles in the press like to, say how strong they are recruiting and all the rest of it, and they build themselves up just to let themselves down. But, it was some season. Dembele finished with 32 goals and Sinclair 25. We were scoring for fun, all over the park. So, yeah.
Yeah, the dog's bark and the caravan moves on, as old Pedro Caixinha said. Yeah, so yeah, he did have Rodgers does carry a reputation for improving players, almost more of a reputation than he has for recruiting them. And I know definitely Scott Brown and Callum McGregor both speak highly of Rodgers and how he had a massive impact on their career. And you're right about Brown in particular. There was that picture of him lying on a pavement, clearly drunk with a kebab in his hand. And that was shortly before Rodgers arrived at the club. And, Brown talks about Rodgers giving him a pep talk and just telling him that doesn't happen again or you're gone. And he credits him with the revival of his career and probably adding another 4 or 5 years onto his football career. So, yeah, definitely a great year. And finishing up like that in the cup final, Willie, it was a very fitting way to put a lid on the season with Tom Rogic scoring the injury time winner.
Yeah, it was. It was a great goal. I mean, it was the thunder, the lightning. It had that sort of scene and setting to it all, didn't it? Like, what I mean? It was just that written in the stars sort of moment.
Yeah, one of those iconic images I think that will hang around the club for years and years to come. Was the picture of Craig Gordon on his knees when the goal goes in, just and all the fans celebrating in the background in the pouring rain, and then Rogic running into the crowd with all the rest of the players. Great times. It was a fantastic season. We'll talk a bit about recruitment now. I'll bring up an image of Rodgers' recruitment, and we'll take a look at that. Do you want to talk us through some of that from the first season, Steve?
Oh, blimey, I can try. The font's not that big, but so let me just bring it up locally. Won't be a second. Yeah, so I mean, look, a lot of hits and misses, so first season, Scott Sinclair coming in, and he really hit the ground running, like we said, and obviously scoring immediately, finished the season with 25 goals, 62 goals over the course of his career with Celtic, which for a wide man, is pretty phenomenal, really. But when you look at that and you think, okay, for that 4.1 million, we almost spent the same on Ebui Kouassi, who I must admit I actually had to look up. I had no recollection of him whatsoever. 22 games and 0 goals. Christian Gamboa, another miss clearly. Doris de Vries, who was brought in as a a ball-playing goalkeeper was, I think, the term that Brendan used at the time. And sank without trace. Two other successes, though. Obviously, Musa came in for, I think, the cross-border training fee, or training compensation fee, or whatever it was, at 400k euros. Obviously, went on to phenomenal couple of seasons with us. And I think Kolo Toure was a good signing too. I mean, he obviously had a few mishaps in his time as well, but it felt like he added a really mature voice in the in the dressing room. And my observation is from this most recent season is the more of those kind of voices you've got in the dressing room that can actually manage across the pitch. You don't just leave it to the captain. If you've got two or three of those types of voices around the pitch, then it really does help. And Kolo Toure was clearly one of those. So yeah, I think I'd be fair to say probably on balance a success. A few frogs kissed to find the prince. But Sinclair and Dembele and Toure, on the positive side. Kouassi, Gamboa, and De Vries, not so much.
Yeah, I think it's fair enough. It's fair enough to call it a mixed bag. Some great successes there, and some absolutely terrible signings, to be honest with you. I'll just bring up a couple of comments, and thanks everyone for joining in. Michael McDonald says, "But where the old Rodgers signings?" And I think that's going to be a theme that comes right through all Rodgers' time at the club. It's not really clear whether he was the man signing all of them. In fact, in some of them, it was obvious and clear that he wasn't the man signing any of them. So yeah, thanks for that. So we'll move on to season 2, which is the 2017-18 season. So we qualified again for the Champions League group stages, where results were again mixed. Lost home and away to PSG by scorelines of 7-1 and 5-0. We lost home and away to Bayern Munich, although we were quite unlucky to lose at home to them. After Callum McGregor brought us level, we lost a late winner for Bayern. We beat Anderlecht 3-0 away, which I believe is our last Champions League win, actually, if I'm not mistaken, in the group stages. But that seems enough to secure Europa League football. We went on to play Zenit St. Petersburg in the Europa League and lost 3-1 on aggregate after a pretty good performance at home where we won 1-0. The League Cup, we won with a 2-0 win over Motherwell in November. Won the league again at a canter, clinched it on the 29th of April with another 5-0 scalping of the Huns at Celtic Park. Although we lost our unbeaten run on the 17th of December with a 4-0 defeat at Tynecastle. Finished the league with 82 points, 9 points ahead of Aberdeen in second. Now, 82 points, not a total that would have won the league this year or any of the past couple of years, I don't believe. So we closed out the treble with a 2-0 win over Motherwell again in the Scottish Cup final. So the second treble in a row, but not an invincible one at this point. So what was our recollections, Willie, of season 2? Do you think the signs were there that it was starting to go a bit awry?
I think season 2, season 1 was a honeymoon period, and season 2 sort of turned into a sort of average sort of season that you would expect. I got some significant results, like 4-0 in November the 4th. We beat St Johnstone 4-0 away, which defeated the 100-year record set by Willie Maley for winning runs. So there were still records being broken there. But at 82 points, like you say, it wouldn't get you the league this year. I mean, probably the opposition around us weren't up to scratch, so kind of got away with it that season. For me, I've got down one of the key results as well was a 1-0 win away at Ross County on November the 18th, which was my last game before I emigrated to New Zealand. Lee Griffiths scored a free kick that day, which if it had been scored by Messi or Ronaldo, that would be on highlight reels across the world still to this day. It was a thing of beauty. It was just superb goal. 78th minute. It looked like a game that was going to die out as a 0-0, but up popped Lee Griffiths. And that was also the season we won 3-2 at Ibrox after going down to 10 men. Edouard stepped up, scored the third. And instead of going, right, let's take a striker off and throw a defender on, he showed a bit of, let's just go for this and see what we can do. And we went and got the win. So, yeah. It was another good season because it's a treble, you know what I mean? There's no such thing as a bad season when you win the treble, but the league form, there was some pretty ropey results in there at times, but overall it was a decent season, man.
Yeah, and Steve, what were your recollections of that season?
It's going to sound a bit negative, but one of my biggest recollections was actually getting thumped by Hearts 4-0, to break the unbeaten run. And I mean, I've been over here a lot longer than Willie, so I was watching it probably in the middle of the night. You're thinking, oh no, we'll get this back, and it just wasn't to be. It went from bad to worse to catastrophic. But it was interesting. I mean, we lost to Hearts, we lost to Killie, Hibs and Aberdeen in the league. Obviously didn't lose to anybody in the cup. But yeah, 4 losses, 10 draws, which was, a bit of an eye-opener to me. My memory of the time of the Brendan years and, subsequent to that is us not settling for a draw, us really pushing and getting that last gasp winner type thing. But I mean, we had 10 draws that season in the league, which, is quite notable. So here's something interesting, right? So top scorer for the year was Sinclair on 18 goals. So slightly down on his 25 from the previous season. But I will shout either of you a beer if you can tell me who was the second top scorer that year.
James Forrest.
It was, yeah. James Forrest on 17 goals. He's one-off joint top scorer. So, yeah, I mean, it was, it was a good season. Like Willie said, let's be honest, it seems a bit, I don't know, a bit picky to be sitting here, picking the bones out of a treble winning season. It was a treble winning season where, we beat all in front of us pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with all that. I'll just bring up a comment from Patrick McLaughlin here, and he says Rodgers came out after the PSG game at Celtic Park and said there were certain players he had told that weren't good enough for the club. Do folk remember that? Well, I must admit I don't remember that. Do you remember that, Willie?
No, I never actually saw the PSG game. I was down doing my medicals for coming. I had to go to Edinburgh, all the way to Edinburgh to do my medicals for emigrating, and I never got to actually see the PSG game because my sister lived there and we met up with her after it all. But I actually met Henrik Larsson the day after that game, which was a surprise. So, yeah.
What, he was doing your medical, or?
No, we were flying back, and my daughter turned around to me at the escalators in Edinburgh Airport and goes, Dad, I want to go up these stairs, the moving stairs. I was right, come on, we'll go and stand on that. And I stood there and I looked at him and I goes, that guy looks like Henrik Larsson. And then I looked again and I goes, oh my God, that is Henrik Larsson. So, yeah, fun story. But I don't remember that comment, to be honest with you. No, that's
I don't remember the specifics. Yeah, I don't remember the specifics, but I do remember it just starting to feel a little bit fractious, the relationships. I know we'll come on to it, and I know it might be a little bit of hindsight, backcasting into this, but I do remember it didn't feel like all was well in the relationships within the camp. I don't remember that specific, no.
Yeah, just on that, Willie, just to go off topic a bit, how did you find Henrik Larsson? Was he approachable, or was he? Because I've heard he was, sometimes a bit not so nice with people approaching him in situations like that.
He was okay, but you could tell it was like, aye, all right, I'll do it. But I'm not really. I wouldn't say he wasn't keen, but you could tell he was uncomfortable with the situation. But my daughter was there, and she's in the picture I got with, and I just kind of shook his hand after and says, "Look, you're a legend, mate. Thank you for everything you've done for the club." But you could kind of tell it was like, I don't really want to be here. So it wasn't. It was kind of. I was starstruck. I was like, so perhaps I'm reading too much into it. Like, but a few people have said that to me. Like people that have actually met him, that he's not. He can be kind of like he values his privacy, sort of thing.
Yeah, I believe it was written into his last contract at Celtic that he didn't have to do any supporters functions. They all had to do a certain amount of them a year, but Henrik Larsson never did it, and I can only assume he wasn't that keen on those sorts of situations. So yeah, Pete McGee's come in and said to us, "Don't forget we led 1-0 versus PSG in Paris." Those were a special few minutes for me and my son. Yeah, they were very special from all of us. I think we just annoyed them though, didn't we? Good goal though from Dembele. Yeah, okay, so we'll bring up the transfers again and we'll have a look at the recruitment for that season. So Willie, are you able to talk us through that, or do you want me to do it?
So the players that we brought in that year, I think, is Oliver and Charlie Musonda. That was a rather expensive failure for a loan deal. Jack Henry, Johnny Hayes, Marvin Comper. Well, less said about him, the better, I would say. Lewis Morgan, Kendai Benyu, who was last I seen was playing for the Wheelstone Raiders, with that little guy with the glasses cheering him on the side of the pitch. Paddy Roberts came in on loan, Scott Bain on loan, and Odsonne Edouard came in on loan with a view to a $9 million move in there. So, yeah, Odsonne Edouard, the big success of that, I would say. Oliver and Charm had a great debut season, but he kind of quickly threw his toys at the pram after a $17 million move to Porto was kicked out. So, and we ended up paying his contract up, so that turned out to be a bit of a flop. But Paddy Roberts was another success, but we could only keep him on loan, so he wasn't really keen on coming to sign for us. So. But Charlie Musonda, I don't actually. He came in with a big fanfare. He was going to be the next big thing, and nothing happened with him. Like Lewis Morgan, the only game I remember Lewis Morgan playing was a Neil Lennon game in the cup final up front, because we had nobody fit, and it turns out he's a big hand. Marvin Comper played all of 90 minutes for Celtic, so that was another couple of million down the drain. Jack Henry went on, he's had a decent enough wee career for himself out in, is it Belgium he's in now?
Yeah, Belgium.
But it didn't work for him here at Celtic. Like, he did well at Dundee, and that's why they brought him in. Scott Bain, still kicking about the club, sort of picking up a wage, being a good bit of banter around the training ground, and that's about it. But there's a real load of dross in amongst that.
Yeah, it's a load of rubbish out there, isn't there, really, to be fair? Yeah. Jack Henry will forever be remembered for dribbling round himself multiple times at Firhill before giving the ball away and then having to do a slide tackle to retrieve it. That was a genuinely hilarious moment. So
where was that? Was that Partick Thistle or was it? I can't remember.
Partick Thistle away. I can't remember if it was a cup tie or a league game, but he done these like 3 pirouettes round himself with no one near him in the middle of the park, then miscontrolled the ball and had to do a slide tackle to get it back. I think he ended up giving away a throw-in. So became a bit of a joke figure, Jack Henry. And I think he was also caught up in a scandal with tickets or something, wasn't he? Was he not getting free tickets off the club and then selling them on or something like that? Yeah.
Allegedly, yes, we have to say.
Allegedly, of course. Yeah.
No, but seriously, when you look at that, I mean, Ncham was talented. He when he was in the mood, which didn't seem to be that often after the first season. He could play, but from there on in, it's pretty ordinary. Musonda, Comper. Lewis Morgan.
The only thing I remember about Comper is him parading around with the league winners medal around his neck, and it's like, you've played one game, like, you know what I mean?
Is that guy?
I'd argue Johnny Hayes.
Johnny Hayes
maybe overpaid, but I mean, he was a grafter, and from memory, I think he scored quite a notable goal. But yeah, there's some pretty ordinary stuff in there. I was always disappointed we didn't get Paddy Roberts. It felt like having him come in on loan really pushed Forest on, and as I say, that was the season where Forest ended up with 17 goals, and it felt that there was genuine competition on that right wing. But yeah, there's some pretty ordinary signings there. Yeah.
Johnny Hayes got his goal at Ibrox, to be fair to him. He's got that little piece of history.
Yeah, and he loved it as well. Which
I loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. So I'll move on to season 3, 2018-19, and I think it's fair to say that the summer of 2018 is where the wheels really started to come off for Rodgers. We had the protracted transfer shambles with Boyata demanding a move and then more or less going on strike because he didn't get it. We lost Dembele close to the start of the season without any time to properly replace him. And then we had the John McGinn saga, which I think it's probably worthwhile touching on. So John McGinn was playing for Hibs at the time, a very promising midfielder. Hibs were looking for £3 million for him. Celtic had offered £2.5 million, and Peter Law refused to increase it at all. Tried to get one over really on Rod Petrie, who was the Hibs CEO. Now, I think that the thinking behind it, or thinking behind Law's point of view, was that McGinn was so desperate to play for Celtic that if they held out, they would get him for that price. It turned out they didn't, and he ended up signing for Aston Villa for £3 million. Celtic having matched the £3 million bid. Too late though. John McGinn was already on his way down to Aston Villa to sign. So that Brendan Rodgers was quite publicly annoyed about that. And if you put that together with the rest of what happened in the transfer window, it sort of showed that the relationship between the manager and the CEO had almost broken down completely. And then you had Dembele sending out cryptic messages about, be careful who you take as your leaders or something like that. I might be paraphrasing. So what was your recollection of that transfer window before we look at the season itself, Steve?
Oh, I mean, it was chaotic. It really was, and I mean, it echoes a little bit to now, in terms of, you had that fractious relationship. You had Lowell meddling, where frankly he shouldn't have been. You had us playing brinksmanship with, a club, and fair dues to Hibs. At the end of the day, it's up to them to get the most for their asset, and they held out, and then we'd obviously either annoyed McGinn enough or just not shown enough faith to him that he's not about to turn around in the M6. He's quite happy. He'll make his way to the Premiership, and and he's gone from strength to strength. But there's just little echoes of that I feel now. In terms of would Lowell mess around with an Ange? In terms of signing, probably not. I think Ange would have told him to do one. But depending on who comes in, is Lowell Senior going to be, back to meddling? I bloody hope not. But yeah, I mean, it really was chaotic. Some of the nights. I mean, if you thought season 2 was bad,
yeah.
Oh my God! Right, so back in Bale.
Sorry, I'll just do that just now. I'll bring up the list just now before we jump into the season itself. So,
because I mean, I think this defines the season really. When you actually look at it. Obviously we signed Edouard on the permanent deal, and he goes on to have a great season. We'll talk about that in a second. But Bale, 2.2 million. Shved. Do you not remember everyone getting so excited about Shved and? He was going to be great. Is he coming back? Malumbu, signing from Kilmarnock on a free. Benkovic, I thought was all right. I actually quite liked Benkovic. I'm not sure everyone did, but then Oliver Burke. I mean, is there a more chaotic player that we've had? Timothy Weah, and then I actually had to look these two up. Andrew Gutman and Manny Perez from the MLS, and. Don't get me wrong, they were youngsters, they were signed, probably more for the future, but neither one of them played a single game for Celtic, which seems weird. and then Toljan, and then Arzani from the A-League. You know, so I mean, you look through that list and it is pretty bloody ordinary. But it almost feels a bit like the manager going, well, I'll show you. You know, if you're not going to back me, oh boy, look out for this. You know, and we just signed a pile of draws, really. You know, frankly.
I think the one thing that stands out more than anything else is the amount of loans. So we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loan signings, 2 free transfers, and the two boys from America were just speculative punts. So I think the John McGinn thing was very, you know, a critical point in the Rodgers management there, and as Mahesh has rightly pointed out, he was elite level in midfield based on his EPL data, and he's gone on to a level now that we couldn't afford him even if we wanted him, and even if he wanted to come back, he's miles out of our level now. So we might move on just to touch on the season itself. So we won the League Cup again at Atlanta quite early in the season. Went out of the Champions League qualifiers to AEK Athens in one of the games that Boyata refused to play in, although it was later claimed he was injured. The League Cup was won, which was the 7th trophy in a row for Brendan. But the league form was causing concern, even though we beat the Huns 1-0 in the first derby of the season. Questions were being raised about Rodgers and his long-term future at the club, mainly around about some of his comments in the transfer window and the breakdown in relations with the CEO. So we lost to Rangers in December, which saw us going into the new year level on points. Now, after Christmas, the form picked up again, and we were on a bit of a run with 7 wins in a row and Rangers dropping points in a number of games at that period, which saw us kick out again to a 9-point lead. Then came February, when it was announced that the club had gave Rodgers permission to speak to Leicester City regarding the manager's job, which he ultimately accepted and left the club, seemingly trying to take our entire backroom staff with him days before a cup tie against Hearts. So we might just touch on the manner in which he left the club. Now, Willie, did that leave a sour taste?
Big time. Like, for a guy who says he's been a lifelong Celtic fan to walk out 2/3 of the way through the season and try and take the whole coaching staff with him, that's just like poor show. And right, from what I gather is that Leicester were prepared to wait until the new season for him, but obviously he's come out and said that's not true, that it was a one-off sort of moment, but I'm not going to take his word for it. I don't think that's true. I don't know. It still leaves a sour taste to this day. We were on our way to 10 in a row. He's going round the stadium giving it all that, and you think this is it. We're on for it, but yeah, it still touches a nerve every time I think about it. Like sitting there watching him the next day, sitting there drinking his cup of coffee at the Empower Stadium or whatever it is, big smile on his face. This is me. I'm back in the big time. Didn't take long for him to get over us, like. So yeah.
So, Steve, before I come to you, I'll just bring up a couple of comments which just really show how the fan base is divided over this. So this is a comment from Jared. It's just 3 little rat emojis all in a row. And he's also saying that he doesn't want him anywhere near the club. But also RL77 is saying he blames Law and not Rodgers. So where do you stand on that, Steve? Probably, we can all agree it wasn't ideal at the timing of his departure, but do you think Law had any part to play in it?
Oh, undoubtedly. I mean, these things are seldom all one side or all the other side. It's normally somewhere in between. I must admit, my view, and I don't know whether it's just tempered with time or maybe tempered with Ange moving on or whatever it is, but I'm less cut and dried about it. I think if we could get him back, and if he could cut all the Danny McGrain crap and the running around the city smelling the mints and all that kind of nonsense, just do your job and do your job well, I would take him back, because frankly, we're in a results business, and if bringing him back, would guarantee us the league, which probably guarantees us Champions League the following year. That's how we build things. We don't have the multi-billion-dollar broadcast deal. Really the only levers we've got is player trading model and European progression. That's frankly the only way we are going to build as a club. And if we can get Champions League this year, obviously coming up, but then the following year, that's an angle for building stuff out. Do I think he would be here in 2 years' time? No, I don't. But do I think it would be convenient to have him for a year? Yeah, I think it would. Sounds very pragmatic, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Willie, this brings us to the crux of the issue. Would you welcome him back as manager? It does seem now more likely than not that he probably is on his way back. And what's your thoughts on that?
If he comes back, I don't think he should come back. I think it's a lazy option. I think it's just not putting an awful lot of thought into what they're doing here. I think there's, as we've talked about, some of his signings are absolutely honking, and as Steve's just said, the player trading model is what we've got to go forward at under Europe. Try and progress in Europe. His European record wasn't that great either, so you might be sacrificing both of them straight away too. So I don't know. I just think there are better options out there. Knutson for one. As Enzo Maresca's, I don't think he's quite ready for it, but there are other managers out there you could have a look at as well. I just think we don't need to go backwards. We want to be a progressive club, not regressive. Could you take him back for a year as a stand-in? Possibly. Would I get behind him? Well, I'll get behind the team. I'll always support Celtic. Would I get involved as emotionally attached to him this time round? No, not in the slightest. I wouldn't be buying anything he said. I would just be like, aye, all right, okay, no worries. It's a results-based business. If he can come in and get results, then fair enough. But there would be no love there for him. I'm afraid he's burnt his bridge with me, for sure.
Okay, so I'll just grab some comments to let us know what people are thinking. And Sean Buist saying relationship had broken down before Rodgers. It was not back, but it was the China issue, which was the previous transfer window. All that stuff had surfaced about him maybe going to China. So Mo in the next comment says, it's us the fans who need to stop the Danny McGrain crap. That crap galvanised the club and brought people together by simply using words, and it worked. I think that's probably a fair point. It's probably us that need to stop falling for that sort of thing when people are prepared to dish it up, including Ange. And I think, and Mo goes on to say, yeah, Brendan will be a great appointment. So clearly disagreeing with you, Willie. My own opinion is I take on board everything you say, Willie. And obviously the manner he left the club was pretty poor. And I think Brendan Rodgers is a bit of an egotist, probably bordering narcissist, if I'm being honest. But I also think Ange Postecoglou was an egotist as well. And I think all the top managers are. And I think if you look at it without emotion, I think you've got to arrive at the conclusion that he's the best manager available to us at this point. I think he's a better manager than Knutson, with more runs on the board. And I also think he's a better manager than Postecoglou, with more experience in top European leagues. So from that point of view, I think it's a bit of a no-brainer. I think his relationship with Peter Lawwell did have a lot to do with how he left the club. And the John McGinn saga, what we've spoke about, was probably the death sentence on his time at Celtic. So I would be happy with Rodgers coming back, albeit we would have to sort of, take anything he says with a pinch of salt about being a fan or being a Celtic diehard or anything like that. But I think at the moment, as it stands, it's the sensible option. And I'll just bring a comment from Colin McRobbie, who's saying Rodgers is not a gamble. The others are. I agree with Steve. Win the league next year with Rodgers and then CL. Another comment from E. Connor saying Knutson would be cheaper. Might be cheaper, but the other thing about Knutson is I was having a look at his record. last season, and it wasn't great. They lost the league by about 18 points last season and had a pretty ordinary European campaign as well. So his record's not without blemish also, and I think he would be probably just as much of a risk as Maresca. Steve, do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I do. And I think that's where it pretty much boils down to. You've got Rodgers, which I mean, I'm not running towards it. At the end of the day, I think it's a pragmatic decision. It's a lower risk decision. I hear all the comments around, just don't let them sign anybody or whatever. But it is a lower risk decision, and yeah, it might cost us a bit more, but frankly, I don't think money's the issue. We're pretty flush at the minute. Or do you take another risk? And let's be honest. I mean, I know we all knew Ange, and we were all confident of Ange's ability, but frankly, plucking that kind of manager out of an untested geography, it is a risk. And I'd argue an Enzo, that's a risk for a different reason, and to me, I just think if we can win the league, and I in no way take it, for granted, I actually think the Rangers will come back stronger next year. I actually think, I hate their style of play, and, obviously I hope it doesn't happen, but I actually think they'll be more organised next year, and I think it'll basically come down to the games between us and them, because the league is really quite weak. Let's not give them any route back into Champions League. Let's stamp on the throat for once. We could have done it several times. Let's be pragmatic. Let's win the league. Let's qualify for Champions League. Let's try and build from there and look beyond just being slightly better than Rangers. Actually look to a better set of peer group. And try and aspire to matching them rather than just being slightly better than Rangers.
Yeah, so we'll just move on quickly and touch on the second favourite for the job, who's Enzo Maresca, the Man City assistant manager. What do we think about him, and do you think there's any other reason that we would be going for him other than he's part of the City Football Group? What do you think, Willie?
I think it's clear that it's all part of the City Group. It turns out Dermot Desmond goes golfing with Pep Guardiola, so obviously with the whispers in the ear on the third tee, look, give Enzo a wee shot. Like, he might be a good manager for you, but it's not. Celtic needs somebody who's proven, somebody who has had time in the hot seat and has won trophies, not somebody who's going to step up from assistant manager. I mean, you'd be as well giving the job to John Kennedy or bringing Scott Brown back up and giving Enzo Maresca a shout. Like his time at Parma, alright, it's become to light that he's had the rug pulled out from under him there, but still 5 defeats, 5 draws and 4 wins in 14 games. It's a bit of a red flag there for me. I'm not keen on that one, but it does show that the signs are there that the City Group and the tie-in seems to be getting closer and closer with these links with them. I mean, Ange was a City Group man, so
yeah, the City Group, just in case anybody doesn't know, is a British holding company which is owned by the Abu Dhabi United Company, which is owned in turn by Sheikh Mansour, who is a member of the Abu Dhabi royal family. So essentially, although they deny it, the group is owned by the Abu Dhabi nation state, which is an oil-rich Middle Eastern country with a questionable human rights record, to say the least. So, Steve, how close do you think our links are with the City Football Group? And do you think it's something we should be embracing, or should it be something we're walking away from?
So look, I mean, we're not a formal part of that structure. I can't remember now. I was just trying to look there how many clubs there are around the world that are part of that structure. There's, it reaches all the way down here. Where you've got Melbourne
12.
City and.
So you've got 12 in total. You've got Man City, New York City, Melbourne City, Montevideo City Torque, Tuas, Lomel SK, Mumbai City, Girona FC, Sichuan Junyu, Yokohama Marinos, Palermo FC, and Esporte Club Bahia. So I don't even know where all those clubs are from, but they have 12 clubs all around the world now. We can't be owned by them because of UEFA's ownership rules, where they're not the same owner can't own two clubs competing in a UEFA competition against each other. So my question is, and what's something I've become quite concerned about recently is, are we owned? Are we part of that group in everything but name?
Well, that's kind of where I was going. So, at the end of the day, at the moment, it feels like we've got relationships into that group, through individuals, so whether that's a Mark Lowell or when Ange came, or, an introduction to, or, whatever it is, it feels very individual relationship rather than, anything formal. What I don't know is whether we're actually getting the benefits beyond that, because the whole point of that City Football Group is, to share resources, to, share scouting approaches, or, whatever it is. And my gut feel says we're not getting that. We're literally, kind of on the edges. But paradoxically, I'm actually probably more comfortable with that. I don't particularly want to be any closer to it. I think we've got strong, proud history. I don't feel we need to be part of that group. And the reality is, well, like you say, regulatory wise, we're not going to be allowed to be. But there's no real benefit to us in that either, because the reality is we're never going to get, beyond our potential, because of the broadcast deal limits, or whatever it is. We're pretty much limited, capped, as it stands. So no, I'm not uncomfortable having associations, but that would be about the limit as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, so one of my main concerns out with the sort of ethics part of it, with the Abu Dhabi human rights record and the sports washing allegations sort of side of things, my concern is the whole thing seems to be run for the benefit of Man City being at the centre of it all, and everyone else kind of feeding into that, if you know what I mean. And Wally, do you think that's fair to say?
Oh yeah, it's definitely fair to say. I mean, you look at, they've got clubs in Brazil, China, Spain, Belgium, India, Uruguay, Japan. It's just it's a mini scouting network in that country, where they have their men in there to have the best knowledge of the players coming up and coming in that areas. And if somebody becomes available at, say, Bahia in Brazil, they can have a look at it and say, right, can we afford him? Can we get him to play for Bahia? He plays a few games for them. Well, this guy's going to be big. We get him over to Man City from there. I feel uncomfortable with it. I just think you just become part of this sort of massive company, one under the one banner with them, and I'm not keen on the idea. We should be looking to form our own relationships around the world with countries, and like, I don't know, get a team in Australia, somebody we can have tie-ins there with, get our own ones in Asia, get our own ones in America. We can have tie-ins with, rather than just relying on other people's sort of scouting networks to help us through that.
Yeah, it just seems to me to be the very opposite of what our club is meant to be about, to be honest with you. And I'll leave the last word on this to Tosh Bear Grylls Jr. Malone. Great username, mate. We want no part of the City Group. That will all come tumbling down at some stage. We don't need to be associated with any of that. And that's probably where we'll draw a line under it. So I'll probably draw the show to a close just about now. I might just ask you guys for a one-word answer. Do you think we'll have a manager this time next week when we record? And will it be Brendan Rodgers? Steve?
Yes and yes.
Okay. And Willie, what do you think?
Yes, and probably yes.
Try that again with some enthusiasm, Willie.
Nah,
yes, and reluctantly yes.
Yes, and yes. Yeah, so Willie's not happy, but one guy that will be happy, I don't know if you remember, shortly after Brendan left, there was a hostage situation up in Bearsden to the north of Glasgow. And the guy's hostage demands were apparently bring me a bag of cans and bring back Brendan Rodgers. So one guy will be happy. So yeah, with that, I'll just say thanks everyone for joining in the comments. Sorry we didn't get a chance to read everyone's out, but we appreciate you joining in. And have a great week, you guys. And hail, hail.
All right. Hail, hail. Cheers, everyone.